18th. Roll call, please, Kathy Steer.
Dick Anderson.
Here.
Jim Davis.
Here.
Doug Holbrook.
Here.
Chester Norikis.
Here.
D.W. Ritchie, he called in that he was not going to make it. Wes Ryan is out. James Scrutton.
Here.
John Skipper.
Here.
Roger Sprague is absent. Susan Walke.
Here.
Kip Ward.
Here.
Jerry Warner.
Here.
Randy Weldon.
Here.
And Don Williams.
Here.
Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I believe we left off during the budget review. Do you have some more remarks, Mr. Chandler?
We do, and it's a pleasure to be with you again this evening and talk a little bit more about the Urban Renewal Agency's budget. Over the past 2 weeks since your last meeting, there have been a couple of questions that came to me regarding process on how things actually happen, how you affect the budget, how you as committee members can make some changes. So I wanted to take a few minutes and just do a little more explanation on this. And this first part, though, is really addressing our elected officials. The others listen in, but this next moment is really addressing the elected officials. You wear 3 hats, okay? You are city council members, your Urban Renewal Agency board members, and your budget committee members. It's easy for those 3 hats to get changed very quickly in a meeting. But when you do, it has a tendency to bog things down quite a bit. Let me give you an example. Contracts for the Urban Renewal Agency or for the city are negotiated and conducted and approved by the City Council or the Urban Renewal Agency Board, not the board committee. If the committee moves into the point where it's trying to negotiate contracts, you're really going to bog things down, and it's putting a role onto the committee which is not theirs to have. And so it's important that you remember that. Now, to all of the committee members on how you affect change in the budget, I wanted to just take a minute and explain a little bit on that. As we go through this process, if there are things that within the budget that you feel individually that you want to change, bring those up during the meeting, and we will make note of those and bring those back to you. Now, much of what you will hear in the Urban Renewal meeting and in the next meeting of the city's budget, the City Council, the elected officials, will have already been working on quite a bit, especially when we talk about construction projects. Okay, so let me use an example on on the role of committee members. Let's say that the city was proposing to build a 55-story skyscraper. Okay, wild idea, just using it as an example. And you, as a budget committee member, think that that is crazy, that ought not to be done. Now, the City Council has been working on this. They have been going forward with it. It is in their plans. The real area in which you can influence policy is in the allocation of the funding for those projects or for any program. So, for example, you've got a 55-story building. You don't think it should be built. One way to affect that policy is to not budget any money for it. Okay? That is the role of the budget committee and the members themselves. Let's say you think, let's use another example. There's a program that the City Council has been working on. It's a $5 million a year program, and they, as a group, want to move forward with it. You as a committee don't think that is a good idea. The way you affect that is in the allocation of the funds within the budget process itself. Okay, so if, for example, I thought the $5 million program was a crazy idea, then I would move to change the budget so as not to fund that program, okay? That's how the committee really influences policy. Now, the other thing that I want to, another example I wanted to use is actually an example from last year. One of the committee members wanted to lower the property tax rates. He wanted to do that because of the annexation of roads in and the extra funding that brought in. He could not get 7 other committee members to agree with him. Therefore, he was not able to change that budget item. But instead, what was done was that $170,000 was allocated towards street improvements, and specifically towards improvements in the Roads End area, which is a project that we just bid out and let that bid out, and it's going forward. That one individual was able to affect and to change that budget by getting 7 people to agree with him that we should fund that type of a project. So that's really how the committee has its greatest amount of influence, is in the approval or the allocation of how the funding is going. Okay, when the roles get mixed up, then it really bogs things down quite a bit. Now, many of you are new to this. If there is something you would like to do, and are not sure how to go forward with that, please contact either me or Debbie, and we will walk you through that process. Even if you're not totally certain what it is, but you've got an idea, we will work with you in how to take your idea to fruition, to bring back to the rest of the committee members to see if it can change, add, subtract, change, modify the budget. Okay? Okay.
Madam Chair, if I might. I want to thank you for that, Ron. That was very nice to hear, and that no matter what, whether it's a pro or a con or an accepted or failed idea, it's nice to know that there's someone you can go to help put that to words.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
It's easy for us as the staff members to just assume you guys know everything there is to know about budgeting, because we do it every day. So if there are any kind of procedural things, whether it's during the meeting or whether it's after the meeting, in between them, we're happy to help and help you formulate your ideas and how you would like to move forward. Now, there were some questions that came up that we wanted to follow through on, and the first one, there were questions that came up regarding the glass studio. Again, some of these were contract questions that really pertain to the Urban Renewal Agency. Some of them were historical questions, and some of them were why it's being accounted in the way it is. If you look to the screen, this building here is the glass studio. It was purchased in 2001 as a part of a purchase of this property here. And the Urban Renewal Agency bought this property and in order to make this road go through, plus to do some intersection improvements. While they were doing, the owners also offered to sell this property to the city, in which or to the Urban Renewal Agency, in which they purchased it. Again, important distinction. Urban Renewal Agency is not the same thing as the city. It's so easy to mix them up. If I do, I apologize. Kurt corrects me all the time on it. So anyways, and so this was purchased by the Urban Renewal Agency in 2001. The purchase price, the price with some concessions and everything came out to about $72,000. In and around 2006, the city, not the Urban Renewal Agency, the city recruited the current tenants to open and operate the glass factory. And it has been operating under an agreement that was negotiated and approved then. Now, this is where the accounting comes into play. The building is owned by the Urban Renewal Agency. It is managed by the city through the VCB, okay? The reason for that was to allow the city to be able to use transient room tax, TRT funds, for those operations, because it fits within the criteria of tourist destination. Now, if we were technically doing everything from an accounting standpoint, what we would have is money being transferred from the VCB to the urban renewal. I'm going to stop using acronyms. From the Visitors and Convention Bureau to the Urban Renewal Agency, and then they would pay the bills. Okay, accountants love that kind of stuff. It gets a little cumbersome, and so it was set up originally so that the Urban Renewal Agency would own the building, but it would be operated through the city's Visitor and Convention Bureau, and that's why the accounting is in the Visitors and Convention Bureau fund and not the Urban Renewal Agency fund. Okay. Any questions on that?
If I might. As far as management fees, charges, I'm sorry, did I not see that? Is there any reimbursement to the city for that service?
They, only in the sense that they pay rent, and then in the contract, we are responsible for some maintenance costs associated with the building.
Okay, so that differs how from the Lincoln Square? Because I notice we see many payments to Lincoln Square from different agencies and for management.
Okay. Mayor, you're going to have to explain a little bit more. So
Maybe I
payments
can't.
from who to whom? From whom to whom, or who to whom?
All I want to know is, we have the Urban Renewal collecting monies from the VCB, I'm assuming.
No.
No, okay, nobody's paying for anything?
No. Okay, you've got two, so let's take the two buildings separately.
Okay.
Okay. The Glass Studio is owned by the Urban Renewal Agency.
Correct.
And it is operated through the Visitors and Convention Bureau. And they just pay for their portion of the costs that are tied to the contract.
And they pay that to,
It's to those that are rendering the service. So, for example, we are responsible for some landscaping maintenance. We're responsible for some repairs to the building.
and we being the city.
We being the Visitors and Convention Bureau, funding the city. We being the city, yes, the city.
Okay.
Now, the Lincoln City Square Fund is owned by, or the Lincoln City Square, this building
Right.
is owned by the city.
Right.
We have created a special fund for the management of it. Okay, and all those different funds that use this building pay into that fund. So the general fund pays into it, the Urban Renewal Fund pays into it, the Visitors and Convention Bureau Fund pays into it, but it operates its own fund. The revenues for that building are all either rent from the tenants or payments by the city's other funds. Okay?
I'll let it lie at that.
Okay.
And the rents, is there a rent or a lease payment for the glass foundry?
Yes.
And that goes,
That is going to the Visitors and Convention Bureau. Yes.
And that's from the current tenants.
That is from the current
Who
tenants.
are they right now? It's not the Jennifer Sears Gallery. What do they call themselves? Wasn't it something different?
Will you, okay.
Yeah.
Mayor, will you hold that question
It's not that
until the
important.
next
It's not
meeting
that
when we
important.
get
Let
the
it go.
VCB group
Let it
in
go.
here,
Let
the
it go.
Visitors and Convention Bureau?
It's not a big deal. I'll figure it out later.
Okay. Now, the next question that you had was regarding the Culture Center, and all of this was centered around really the contract. So again, I'll remind you of the hats that you wear on this. The Urban Renewal Agency Board will be negotiating and discussing that contract with the current tenants beginning at their next meeting. They will make a decision at that point on whether or not they like the provisions of the lease agreement. Okay. Now, switching hats now to the Budget Committee, you as a Budget Committee members and not as the Urban Renewal Agency Board, again, on ways to affect the policies. Currently, the lease for that facility has been waived, okay, by the Urban Renewal Agency.
The rent has been waived?
Yes. Mhm. If you feel that that is if you feel that that is a good idea, okay, and you feel that the Urban Renewal Agency Board should continue that, then in your budget, you should not budget for it. And you should make a recommendation to the Urban Renewal Agency that they should waive that. If you feel that they should not waive that, then you should budget for the cost of the rent and then make a recommendation to the Urban Renewal Agency Board that they charge, or that they charge for the rent. Okay? Again, even though 7 of you are the Urban Renewal Agency Board, it's very important that you act now as Budget Committee members, not the Urban Renewal Agency Board. Okay? And so that's how you affect, in this case, that's how you would affect the policy of the Urban Renewal Agency as it pertains to the Culture Center.
And then just for the sake of new members, once that's passed along the recommendation, it's up to that individual board to accept or reject it, right?
It is.
So if they just reject it,
Well, let me change that. That's only partially true.
okay?
It is as far as the recommendation on the terms of the agreement. That is only a recommendation, and the Urban Renewal Agency Board is free to accept, reject, modify that recommendation. As far as the budget is concerned, okay, so let's say that you do feel it's a good idea that the rent should be waived, and you do not budget any money in this, and then the Urban Renewal Agency decides they want to collect the rent, then they have to change the budget. Does that make sense? Okay, so as far, a recommendation as far as the contract is only a recommendation. An approved budget by the committee has to be either adopted by the Urban Renewal Agency Board, or it has to be modified by the Urban Renewal Agency Board before it is adopted. Okay?
Madam Chair, I apologize for just bursting out again. I control myself.
Clear as mud? Okay. Again, after the meeting, over the next couple of weeks, if there's any questions, further explanations, either contact me or Debbie, and we will be happy to try to answer those as best we can. Now, I do believe we got as far as beginning to talk about the capital projects. I think that's where we left off from our last meeting. So we will begin.
What page is that, Mr. Chandler?
We will begin on page 11 of the section 3 of your book. And this is the Urban Renewal Capital Fund.
Construction fund?
Construction fund.
Yes.
Page 11.
Yeah, Urban Renewal Construction Fund. Okay, the revenue, let me bring that up. Let me point these items out. Okay, the revenues for the Urban Renewal Construction Fund primarily come from the beginning fund balance. And that is the remaining amount from a bond issue in fiscal year 2014. So the construction projects, there are 3 projects that have been identified, and I'm going to ask Mr. Olson if he will talk about each of these 3. The first is the Baywalk, and then one we call Roby, and the final is the West Devils Lake sewer main.
So midway down the page, it says capital outlay. You see sidewalk construction for $150,000. And that is divided into 2 projects, as Mr. Chandler said. One is for the Baywalk project, and that would be constructing a section of it that would go from the Schooner Creek Bridge to just short of the Bay House. We have another project that's going in at the Bay House, so it'll connect up. So that'll put a sidewalk then completely through that section of Highway 101.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Riley?
Kurt, if I could just, will that include any renovation of the bridge itself?
No.
Is it going to match sidewalks? Because you've got like about a,
It's only going to go to the,
drop
there's
there.
already, you know, where the pavement is now, where everybody parks. There's already a sidewalk there. We're going to that sidewalk. And then from there, from the end of that sidewalk to the bridge, it's not a very long distance, but that'll have to come at a different time.
thank you.
The second part of that $150,000 will go to a project to put in a sidewalk between 62nd and 63rd Street in the Cutler District. And that's along the frontage of Roby's Furniture, and they're in the process of doing a major renovation on their site, and so we are partnering with them to do some infrastructure improvements along the highway that came out of the Cutler Community Vision Plan. The second project down at where it says West Devils Lake Force Main, that's the project that's not exactly the West Devils Lake Force Main. It's really ends up being the gravity main for that section of pipe. And that work is underway right now. You see there's an $800,000 figure in where it says estimated budget year 2015-16, which is the current year, and then $100,000 in the budget that you are currently talking about. It's very likely that that project could get completed this year. However, when we're building the budget, their original schedule for completing the project is June 23rd. And if experience has told me anything, it would be that may not get done on June 23rd. So that means we need some place to budget money for next year. So instead of putting $900,000 into the current year budget, we put $100,000 into next year's budget in order to finish up the project however it's completed. So that's what that's for. And that project is underway as we speak, as many of you know. And those are the three projects that we have this year in the construction fund.
Madam Chair? Sorry to be the dense one here tonight, but that's my job. Under the Wilder Force Main, just so I understand, we had a budget of $600,000 in 2015-16. Then we went to $800,000 for 2015-16. Walk me through that. So how much of that is spent?
I'm going to actually ask Mrs. Bradley if she will come up and talk a little bit about this. We're really getting into her realm of the work.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Everybody. I'm Lila Bradley, Public Works Director. And this project, as the council might remember, went over budget when we actually bid the project. And so it was $800,000 was the actual bid amount, or actually it was $900,000. And as Kurt said, for retainage purposes and different things that we have to pay after June 30, that's why the $100,000 is there. But we have brought that to council in the past on, when we bid the project. It's under construction now.
Right. So as far as the money spent, are we on budget for that? Or?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
The next item that we wanted to mention is you'll notice that additional capital reserve of $1,095,227. There was originally a project that we were looking at of another lift station. The estimates came in higher than this estimate. So rather than trying to deal with this now, we're proposing to leave that in. The next bond issue that we're planning for the Urban Renewal Agency is in 2017-18 of $2,975,000, and so we will use that bond issue for that project and other projects that will be determined by the Urban Renewal Agency Board. So right now, that's really a placeholder until such time as we're ready to go forward with another project.
Interesting thing, Mr. Chandler, the last 2 years, every item that has been spent in capital outlay is for public works project. And it appears that the city has totally lost the goal of the city when it came to urban renewal. It's no longer an urban renewal project. It's basically two big public works projects that we have in this community.
The answer to that depends on how you define what the goals of the urban renewal
if you read the
agencies
goal,
are.
it very specifically spells it out.
Okay?
But anyway, we won't go into politics tonight, but it's just a comment that,
Well,
it's-
it is good for me to point out a little bit of history, and I'm actually not trying to defend any previous administrations, but it is interesting to point out when you talk about the purposes for that. Certainly, the city has put, or the Urban Renewal Agency has done a lot of construction infrastructure projects, just exactly as these ones that we're talking about now. But they also have done other things that are meant to try to meet the urban blight conditions of those goals. One of the best examples is Glass Factory. The Glass Factory is actually a Brownsfield property. And that was, that used urban renewal funds for its renovation, and also it's for an economic development. And as a matter of fact, it is going to be highlighted in our mayor's convention this summer as one of the prime examples of both urban renewal and also economic development. The loan programs are also meant to meet those urban renewal blighted conditions. So again, I'm not trying to support, defend, put down any previous ones, but there have been constructions. Now, Mr. Warner is right. The projects that are proposed for this fiscal year are infrastructure projects, and that is correct. That is what is being proposed.
if you were referencing the Ballard Building, well, that's off of the tax rolls. It was a viable business before, but now it's off the tax rolls. So it'd be very hard for the city to identify any projects that basically added to the tax base. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Warner. Next time, could you please address the chair before speaking out? And there will be time later for us to make comments. Thank you.
Any other questions then on the construction fund? Okay, we have two other funds for the Urban Renewal Agency budget that we need to mention. The first of those is the tax increment fund, which is
Page 9.
page 9 of your budget. I'm going to ask Mr. Tierney if he will come up and actually address this one. This fund is used for the payment of debt. And so, Mr. Tierney, if you will address this one, please.
This is the fund where all the property...
Mr. Tierney, could you introduce yourself, please? Since your name is not Allison. There, thank you.
If you will note, the revenue for this fund is all property taxes. And plus the beginning fund balance. The expenditures for this fund are strictly for debt payment. And if you look down at that debt service category, look at the estimate for 2015-16. There's $990,703 there. That is the second payment on the $4 million bond issue that we issued in fiscal year 14. And if you come across, there's $1.8 million for the budget year we're talking about. That is the bond payment for next June 1, 2017. The reserve that's there is actually enough money to make the 2018 payment ahead of time. And if the agency decided to do that, then we could issue new bonds, the remaining $2,975,000 that we're allowed in fiscal year 17-18. And we could actually do it after tax collections in November, December of 2017. The purpose of this fund is strictly to receive the property tax dollars and to pay the debt of the agency. And if you look on the page just before this, page 8, that goes down through the calculations that I have to make to determine what that estimated taxes to be received is going to be. Almost every number in here is an estimate. Okay? The only real number that's there is the very first one. That one I know for sure. Okay. Now I'm trying to guess growth. I'm trying to guess, and then we have to release 80% to the overlapping taxing districts. Then we're going to come down to the estimated composite tax rate. And this is a different tax rate than what you're used to on your property tax bill. This is property tax rates minus any bond levies that's on your tax statement. So where our average tax rate is about $16.20, the urban renewal rate is only about $13.90 because it excludes bond issues. And I'm going to go one step further. One of the important things of the budget committees, one of the tasks that they have is approving the tax levy each year.
That's the city budget committee.
Also urban renewal. We impose. Different terminology, same thing. All three, and then the city is the general fund and the bond fund. All three of them are calculated totally different, and you certify to them totally different. In urban renewal, about halfway down it says taxable assessed value 20%. That is the number, that $49 million number is what we certified to the county assessor.
I'm sorry, as what?
It's what we certified to the county assessor.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay? So when you do approve the budget of urban renewal, you need to include that in your motion, that we are certifying to that number. We're not certifying to the estimated taxes to be received. We're certifying to the taxable assessed value. And that is strictly an ORS rule. It's not anything we make up. That's just how it has to be done. When you get to the city, the general fund, you'll be certifying to a tax rate. And when you get to the bond fund, you'll be certifying to a dollar amount that we want to raise to pay bonds. So all three of them are different. I'll stop. I know, I see the glassy eyes.
Anyone have questions of Mr. Tierney? Thank you.
Next fund is on page 10, which is the property rehab fund, and I'm going to ask Mr. Olson if he'll come back up on this one. There is, this accounts for 4 programs that we have, the property rehabilitation, the economic development loan programs, and the economic development grant program. The primary source of revenue is the loan repayment for funds that we have already, or for loans that the Urban Renewal Agency has already made to other organizations and businesses that have used that. So, Mr. Olson, I'll turn it over to you to give more specifics on those.
So the expenses in this account are in materials and services, and there is funding for, we provide architectural services to people that take out loans if they look like they're going to need them, and especially if we can encourage them in a certain direction during the design process, progress of their project. Then there is our property rehab program, which we've had for many, many years, and in that we were able to fund it this year at $255,000. We put $75,000 in our economic development loan program, which is a relatively new one. That's for business expansion. And we had then $48,000 that we really sort of earmarked for grants for this year. One would be to the Oregon Coast Community College to help subsidize business classes for any business owner or employee in the district that wants to take a class at the community college. And then also to help fund a first year of a 2-year pilot program for the Bay Area merchants to hire a downtown manager to work with the Nelscott, Taft, and Cutler City districts. And then you'll notice below that, this fund then is zeroed out. So we put all available money into these programs this year. It's the first time that's happened. We've always had a carryover, but the program, because we've added some new programs, put out some new publicity, we used up most all the funds last year, and so we were only able to allocate this much funding for the loan programs and the grant programs this year. In the future, it's likely that this fund will only have about $100,000 to continue each year, because that's the payback on the loans that are out. Now, that may go up. If we loan this much out, that may go up another $25,000 through as payback during the year. But virtually, this program is to that point where, as the money gets paid back, that's what will be available for the next year, unless we fund it, add additional funding to it.
Chair?
Mr. Williams?
Just quickly, Kurt, just so I'm clear, the property rehabilitation, that's the loan program for facade improvement?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Anderson?
Kurt, where would the money come from, other than repayment of these, to go into these funds? Is that on page 11 where we talked about capital outlay, and have a reserve? Could hypothetically, though, some of those
That's
funds-
where the original money came from, was from the general fund. From the general fund monies.
So,
Urban Renewal, General Fund money.
Perhaps Ron Tierney could help explain that a little better.
The original money came from what we call a de jure financing. We borrowed $1.2 million one day and paid it back the next day out of that bond fund. Once we did that, those funds become unrestricted. As long as there's outstanding debt, like in the Urban Renewal Construction Fund, we cannot transfer that because we're talking tax exempt versus taxable use. In the facade program would be a taxable use, where building infrastructure is a tax exempt use. Once that debt's paid off, now the restrictions go away. And it could be done at that point in time.
So, Madam Chair, when you were talking about paying off the debt and having a reserve, as you've got on page 9, the tax increment fund, you're showing in the reserve $1.2 million roughly.
Yeah,
You're saying
that's basically the June 1, 2018 payment.
hypothetically could be, but I guess my question is that also the funds then that could go to, so cut to the chase, where do you find the money to increase funding in these programs?
Well, see, that part of it's changed since we released 80%,
Okay.
only keeping 20%. We were actually receiving more than what our debt payment was. But right now, we're going to be at the point where we're only collecting what our debt payment's going to be. So that's where that changes.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Is Mr. Warner?
Yes.
Where does the banks that are handling the loans for urban renewal, how do they get compensated? In other words, if they're doing the paperwork and handling the loan, they need to get paid some money for doing this for urban renewal, and where is that in the budget? Or
Yeah, it's in their loan payments, what they pay back, what the client pays back to the
bank?
To the bank, yeah.
And so they're not getting the zero interest then?
Well, they're getting zero interest, but there are fees associated with applying for the loan and managing the loan through the.
And what does that percentage come out to?
Oh, I'd have to, I can get you that number, but I have to get back.
Well, I mean, it's interesting whether they get 3% or 4% for handling the loan or whatever.
I don't know that.
I don't see it in the budget is what I'm concerned about.
Well, we can get you that information. I don't think it's a percent. I think it's a fee.
A flat fee?
I believe so.
Okay. Maybe by next meeting you can address that issue.
Okay. Madam Chair, that concludes our discussion on the Urban Renewal Agency budget.
Well,
Thank you, Mr.
Madam Chair, before we leave, I have one more question, if I may ask about going back up to actually the urban renewal personal services. And as I look through here, personal services, you have it listed as this year 86,623.
Jerry, page you're on?
Page 5.
Excuse me, page 5.
Yep.
And then when you look back in the salaries, it shows 79,911 under salary. I guess I'm not following this.
So there's some additional pay that's in regular salaries that's not part of the base salaries that's shown on the report. For example, a car allowance.
Pardon?
Car allowance might be one. Cell phone allowance. There's a couple allowances that are not part of the base salary, but they are included in the expense.
So what you're telling me that this 79,911 that's showing back there under salaries, and then I notice that there's a $18,000 increase this year.
There's a change. There's a budgeted change in the staffing. So right now we have one part-time director and one full-time assistant. The part-time director is in part-time salaries, and the assistant is in full-time salaries. The proposed budget changes that, where the director will be full-time, and then there'll be an intern that's part-time.
Well, I follow that part. But like I say, there's a difference in the salary here.
Let me look up the difference here.
And also, we're only doing 1/5 of what we were doing in urban renewal because we're down to 20%, and all of them are public works projects. I guess I'm having a hard time justifying that $18,000 increase. Not that I want to get into individuals, but I'm just saying it's hard for me to understand that part.
Mr. Warner, where were you finding the salary?
But if you I'm looking at page 5 under urban renewal, and then I'm also looking back in the salaries. I'll give you
Oh, in the back, in the
In the
appendix.
back.
Okay,
and the salary is different back there,
okay. Thank you.
so I didn't know which one we're really working off of here.
Jerry, I apologize, I was not correct on that. If you look at the salary schedule, there's 6,700 allocation from the finance director. In the current year, that was an allocation from Ron Tierney, which is in the part-time budget. In the proposed budget, it's an allocation of my time, which is a full-time. So if you take that 6,700 plus the 79,000 urban renewal, that's your 86. I'm sorry, I should have looked before I spoke.
Well,
That comes back, that again comes back to fund accounting. Each fund is meant to be its own set of self-balancing accounts, which means the time, for example, that Debbie will work on, that her time gets allocated between funds. And so a portion of it is in the Urban Renewal Agency Fund, a portion of it is in the General Fund, a portion of it is in the Water Fund, a portion of it is in the Sewer Fund. And so that's also why we put salary information in the back, so that you can see the total of it. But again, that comes back to fund accounting, which is fairly unique to government.
Total salaries is going down. If you combine full-time and part-time salaries, in the 15-16 budget, it's $123,000. In the proposed budget, it's only $105,000. So in total, it's going down. It's just
I
shifting.
understand that, but the one, and I'm not, we shouldn't be talking about individuals here, but it breaks down to the fact that there is a $18,000 difference in salary for the director, so. From last year.
No, because the director is in the part-time salary last year, not in the full-time. You're comparing full-time to full-time, and it's different positions in the full-time this year versus next year. So you're comparing the assistant to the director rather than the director to the director.
Well, I'll argue that point with you later. There's no sense of.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Davis?
Yeah, I'm going to go back page 10 on the rehab program. If I understand Kirk right, next year we're only going to be at about 125,000 program.
No, because we have the 200,000 from carryover, 282,000 from the beginning fund balance from carryover.
Okay, but then the year after that we're going to be down.
Then we won't have the carryover, it's likely, if we give out those loans, which we are likely to do. That's not very much. That's four or five loans is all that is.
Okay, I want to ask one more question on a sore subject, just because I don't understand it. I can't get my arms around it. Going back to the glass deal, what do they pay in rent per month?
$950.
I'm going to ask you to hang on to that question until we get to the Visitors and Convention Bureau Fund.
Back to Urban Renewal. For some reason, I can't get my arms around how Urban Renewal owns the property, and yet another agency gets the rental off of it. I mean, if anybody's got a piece of property out there, want to give me the rent, I'd gladly take it, you know.
The rent is used to
I
pay
don't understand it.
the rent is used to pay the operating expenses. So the operating expense, maintenance expenses and the rent are in the same fund. Yes.
And why is it when the city put an appropriate rent on a piece of property in the prime area?
Well, that's a different question.
Well, Madam Chair, I guess then I would have to ask, who do we address the amount of rent to?
Okay.
To whom do we address the amount of rent due?
Okay. There, again, I'm going to change hats a little
Okay.
bit. Okay. As far as the negotiation of a contract goes, that would be the city council who negotiates, the staff and then ultimately approved by the city council for the negotiation of a contract with someone to rent our property. Okay? So it is the city council that ultimately determines how much rent is received from the property that they own.
Because the VCB is managing it.
because the VCB is managing it.
But then Urban Renewal does not tell the management company what to charge in rent.
Again, if you,
How do we divest this? How do we make this less cumbersome?
well, the answer,
Question, sir. That's why I'm asking.
well,
That's why I'm
actually, it
Thanks
does
for
a
your
little
input.
bit. The answer to that will actually make it more cumbersome for Debbie, okay?
Okay.
If we were doing this perfectly as the accountants would like it, the VCB would be paying the urban renewal, and then urban renewal would pay the bills. Okay? Now, again, the reason that it was set up this way was so that we could take advantage of using the transient room tax funds for the, for that building. Okay? And it fits within that. It fits within the criteria of that. But the transient room tax funds do not come to urban renewal. They go to the general fund, they go to the VCB fund, they go to the streets fund, and they go to the parks funds. And so that's why it's managed through the Visitors and Convention Bureau, because it allows us to use the funds. Now, as far as how it's actually used, there is a rent that is paid to the city that gets accounted in the Visitors and Convention Bureaus. And just as any landlord, there are also expenses that are incurred by owning that property. Those expenses also come out of the Visitors and Convention Bureau fund as well. Now, for the past several years, there's been very few expenditures that have taken place, and it's mostly just been the rent that is received. This year, the expenses, there were some major, not renovations, but repairs that had to be made. And so it's about even. But now, again, if it is the desire of the Urban Renewal Agency to have those monies come back to it, then it should charge rent to the VCB.
Thanks.
Madam Chair, go ahead.
Mr. Warner, did you have a question?
Yeah, Madam Chairman, in respect, somebody asked the question how much they pay. The last contract was $950, so they pay less than 15 cents a square foot for that building in lease. And according to the contract, why the city has to maintain most of the structure on the outside of the building, so it's a very lucrative deal for the glass blowing business, especially when 85% of all the glass floats that are manufactured in some other location other than Lincoln City.
Mr. Anderson, did you have a question?
I do. Going back to the capital outlay, I guess that's page 11. I just want to make sure that by the $1,095,000 under additional capital reserve is available for projects yet to be named in 2016, 17.
Yes, by having that in the additional capital reserves, that is correct.
All right, so, because otherwise, it looks like there's one project, this sidewalk projects going on from Urban Renewal. And I know we had a list of other things potentially that could be done, and so this is where funding would come.
That's where the funding would come. And it could come sooner or later, depending upon the project.
Great. Thank you.
I had one short question before we continue this. The lease income of $30,185 on page 5, top of the page. I understand that $30,000 was to come from the cultural center. What's the 182?
I think that's the total.
Oh, okay, okay. Thank you. Right. I would entertain a motion to continue our hearing until May 16th.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to continue the urban renewal budget hearing until May 16th at 5 o'clock, same location. Discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Motion passes. Thank you.
Madam Chair, who seconded the motion?
Mr. Williams seconded, excuse me. Mr. Ikus moved. We're adjourned.
You only get to use it once. You need about 5.